All right, welcome everyone. Today we've got Joshua Pardue. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Garrett.
And Josh, you are a real estate developer, investor. We were just talking before we went live about your strategy. You were explaining to me is very opportunistic. You're involved in some build-to-suit stuff for business relationships and certain tenants, pure speculative development, certain bets you've made over the years.
Yep.
And also buy and hold strategy as well. So how did you get interested in real estate, Josh?
Well, when I moved to Tampa, I moved to go to USF, and I had a little bit of cash from some entrepreneurial ventures when I was in high school, mowing lawns, saltwater fish tanks, all that stuff.
Wow.
And I realized, like, okay, I'm studying finance. I want to buy a property, and the 10% cash on cash. So you put in $100,000 and you make $10,000. I got fascinated with that metric and started buying houses and just trying to renovate them on the weekends, move to the next.
How did you get interested initially, though? I mean, a young kid talking about 10% cash on cash. Were you reading books? Like, how did you learn this information?
Well, that I picked up at USF, studying finance in the very beginning. Just the simple metrics. Things either go up in value or you receive cash flow. Those are your two forms of return.
And you thought, damn, that's a good idea. So like literally you're mowing lawns, you're doing some of these flipping couches, whatever.
So I was in high school in Daytona. I was doing that different stuff. And then first year at USF, during that time I fell in love with Ybor, moved to Ybor, started getting some smaller properties and working on them while I had a separate business that was doing promotions for the entertainment industry in downtown Tampa and in Ybor, and setting up the VIP concierge when folks would come in and spend a bunch of money, and I'd capture a percentage of that. And when that business picked up, they'd pay out cash at the end of the night, and I was going to Wachovia before Wells Fargo acquired them with cash, and they kind of look at me funny. Well, it's his business, you know. And I realized at that point, like, okay, I need to start buying real assets. And that's how I got into residential real estate.
I had a buddy that did that in college, and it was super lucrative. It was him and two other guys. They went statewide. So they're in Gainesville at UF. We were at Florida State. They're going to UCF. And they would set up deals like that in all these little areas and promote, and they were making a ton of money.
It's the hospitality currency.
What year was this in Ybor City? Like early 2000s?
So early 2000s is when I moved to Tampa.
The nightlife in Ybor, people know it today. It's it's at the prominence of what people think of Ybor,
right.
Along with the other fantastic historical stuff.
Yeah.
We've exhausted so many conversations on the show about that. But what was it like in the early 2000s? Was entertainment at the forefront?
Yeah, the vibes were different. I'd say from what I've heard in the 90s is when the entertainment started really picking up in Ybor. And at the time in the early 2000s when I got there, it was diverse. You had the college night, you had the house dance crowd, you had the hip hop, and then you had live music, and it was a little bit more diverse. I think in the last chapter, it's gotten a little bit of a different rap and a little different crowd and whatnot. But at that time, very distinct nights and events and whatnot. And it was still finding its way into entertainment. And after I had the first residential deal, I realized that I could move on to the next one, get primary financing, rent out the last one. And if I made them look nicer with track lights and paints and different things, people pay a couple $100 more in rent, and that went straight to the bottom line. Then I met a gentleman out one night spending a lot of money, and I was wearing the suit and, entertaining, doing all these things. And he's like, "You do great in real estate." And I made a joke. I said, "Yeah, I've actually got some of my own portfolio. I've been working on building it up." He goes, No, you should get into brokerage as well. Long story short, we became business partners and opened a residential brokerage while I was at USF and did FHA credit loans. And we were cranking. I think I did 100 residential sales while I was in college, and then I built up a portfolio over a dozen homes. And then when I was getting done with that, I thought I was going to move to New York City at that time, because make it here, make it anywhere, and go the finance route.
Yeah.
But then I'd started to fall in love. Like, I'd always liked development. When I was a little kid in Daytona, or I remember when they built Sky Point. I left the hub one night. full disclosure. And I looked up and I sat down. I'm like watching them pour the concrete in the columns as it went vertical. And I ended up, buying a unit in there and living in Element and falling in love with urban Tampa, but just falling for development. So I knew when I was done with undergrad, I'm going to commercial. So I actually gave him my 1/3 of the residential business. He was surprised I didn't try to sell it. I just walked, went to Colliers, had a good relationship with some of the leadership there, Lee Arnold. There was a gentleman, Pat Duffy, back in the day, and was working out of West Shore. And at the time, the philosophy was relationships, liquidity, expertise, and building that up. Because I had the residential portfolio, but I had to figure out how to transition to commercial. And the best way to do it is doing commercial deals and meeting the people and getting involved with banks and different things. And so while that was going on, it started to work pretty well. But then once Lehman Brothers fails, I'll never forget, I was in West Shore and I walked in, the office buildings on Cypress as you're going up to Lois. There's the 3 beautiful office buildings on the right-hand side. They're like 80s, 90s buildings. But I'm sitting in there looking at Lehman Brothers fails and trying to think to myself, what is this going to do to my commercial real estate career?
Right.
And at that time, the CBRE, JL Colliers, like the few big firms, no one was coming in. You had lead guys that were doing 7 figures easy as brokers that weren't even showing up at the shop. And I'm going in, sitting in my cube, looking around like, this is not good.
Yeah.
No banks are getting financing, this, that. But I just, I always found just hard work, discipline, and sticking to the plan. So my plan was to get after it. And so I showed up for 10, 12 hours a day, did that. And then I shifted. I was doing some medical deals, which I think helped a little bit because medical is a little bit insulated from some of the overall issues. And then my other passion was investment sales. And so I was doing net lease medical sales, which we talked a little bit before about the niche. I mean, this was very niche stuff. And
how are you meeting these business owners of a medical company?
I mean, at that point, it was brokerage, old school brokerage 101. You
Pick up
make
the
a list,
phone.
you build relationships. We'd go to the hospitals, go to the medical office buildings.
Wow.
You talk to the tenants, you
Boots
talk
on
to
the
the
ground
building
type
owners.
stuff.
Very boots on the ground. And at that point, knowing the St. Joe's, Baycare, the different markets was a part of the business. And then within investment sales, okay, so you have leasing and user real estate, and then you have capital markets real estate is the way that I would explain it. The capital markets real estate is just pertaining to the sale of larger investment properties, plus debt and equity moving around the capital markets. So that was where my heart was with my finance and my study and background. And the user deals are something that everyone needs to do to understand how commercial real estate 101 works. So I did a bunch of user deals. My passion was on the investment sales side, and just started doing net lease, single tenant investment sales. So if you think about like Tower Radiology was one of the first deals a long time ago. We sold off all their locations to a REIT in order to create a large lump sum cash event to use that to help grow their business.
Okay.
By entering a 20-year sale leaseback. So now some group out of New York owned all these imaging centers around Tampa, and these guys are paying a rent. But it was a smart move for them at the time because the cap rate and cost of capital were low and the lump sum was large. They diversified their business and spread it.
Equipment, hiring, whatever that may be.
That's right. They as I'd say in the they unleashed their equity. It was tied up in the real estate and used it in higher return on equity activities.
There's kind of that line where on one side, it would be very advantageous for a company, especially a solo or a small partnership, to own the real estate. When you retire, you've got that nice nest egg for you.
That's right.
But then at the same time, you've got so much equity in your business tied up in real estate, and real estate is not your business. So is that something that was unique to that time period, or today are larger companies still selling their real estate, reinvesting the cash? Has that shifted?
It's a great question. And neither strategy is wrong. It's just what's right for your business. If you're a smaller physician historically, for example, or a smaller business owner, your CPA told you, own your real estate,
Right.
get that equity, watch it go up. Now, and that's very true, and that certainly has worked. I know you own some properties, and a lot of people watching the show are property owners. On the flip side, there's a little bit more advanced financial way of thinking that a CFO might come back and say is, if my real estate's only a 6, 7, or 8, 9 cap, yet my business is doing 20, 30% return on assets and return on equity. Should I exit all that real estate, sign a 20-year lease with someone with options, free up that cash with a real low cap, and then go out and grow my higher returning assets?
Right.
And so I was playing that mile deep, inch wide niche. And then when the world fell apart, what had happened is everybody in the capital markets or investment sales side said, call the banks, work on distressed REO situations. This is the Lehman Brothers failed chapter. And I'm sitting there for a couple of years and nothing's happening. So I started working with the banks and the distress, but there was one day there was a call and everyone on the call said, well, we're gonna call these banks and broker their deals. And I said, well, respectfully, if I'm gonna call banks, I'm going to try to buy these distressed assets, because the things had gone from, in Florida, recall, land and good assets dropped 50%.
Crazy.
It was absolutely
you saw
crazy.
it more than an opportunity to broker these sales and earn a commission. You saw it, hey, I need to have the ownership.
And
of
I
some
had
of
my
these
background
properties.
already in property ownership
Right.
before doing the brokerage. And that's why I say, I think a good strategy that worked for me was building the portfolio as an investor, developer, owner, and also doing advisory work to build relationships with coded expertise. But at this distinct point, when I realized that Florida real estate had gone on sale at the right part of my career, we went after every properties that we could from banks. And
There was a lot to choose from back then.
there was a
too.
lot to choose from. And you form good partnerships along the way. And each deal's different. I mean, we ended up closing on 32,000 square foot cold storage in Fort Lauderdale. We bought 5 acres in Celebration off of I-4. If you're driving west on I-4 and you look out the window at Celebration, you'll see a storage facility, a 3-story storage facility that was a CubeSmart. We bought the land for $800,000 and ended up selling the storage facility $19 million about 2 years later. It took a long time.
Right.
Like all this stuff took time. We bought 15 acres off of Highway 27 and I-4, 200 acres in
What would that site
Sarasota.
go for today? The site with the storage on it, off in Celebration.
So we bought 5 acres for $800,000. We cut it in half, built a 3-story state-of-the-art storage facility, 80,000 square feet on 2.5 acres. We have the other 2.5 acres today.
Oh, you still have it.
Yeah, it's probably.
And you sold the half for 19?
Yeah, and the additional land's worth a few million. There's a lot of entitlement, different things you have to do.
Yeah.
We originally got it entitled for a 40,000 square foot office facility. Of course, now office is only good with build to suit. So we're looking at that location in Celebration. Is that a hotel or apartment building?
What a site though. What a great spot. So hard to come by today.
So hard to come by. But at the time, for those few years from kind of 10 to 2014, we picked up a lot of different distressed assets. And my whole bet was Florida's going to come back. And this is a once in a lifetime opportunity.
I want to talk really, really quickly, just since we're on the subject of you being young and finding opportunities, and timing is very important, clearly.
Absolutely.
For a young person today, things are so expensive. Purchase price, dirt, right? Everything, construction, insurance, debt, it's all very expensive. Looking back with hindsight, what would you do today? Would you value relationships? Would you value trying to find a way to earn a high level of income, save money, and then get into your first deal? Sounds like you did it all at once.
Well, it's a great question, Garrett. I think first and foremost, relationship. Every person you meet, you do business with, don't look at them like a transaction or a short-term opportunity. Look at them like something you care about and want to add value to for the rest of your life. And you're going to live a long life these days with medical science.
Yeah.
And there's no compromising on that. And by doing that, what happens with these people, because the folks you're dealing with, they're intelligent, they're good people. Like people can feel when someone's transactional. So stay away from that and just focus on doing what's right and try to help create value. Whether you're a developer or whatever you're doing as an entrepreneur or as even an employee, team member, whatever not, just try to create value. And if you're doing business with the right people, they'll let you capture a piece of that.
Yeah.
And so if you think about like some of the stuff that we're talking about and working on, like buying these properties, I was raising money. I wasn't sitting on $2 million to buy a property in 7 days. You have to have a relationship with someone to raise that and just capturing a piece of the value you created for everyone else. Same when you broker a deal. If you think about it, you're just capturing a little piece of the value you created for everyone.
I love that. I always had that frustration when I was younger. So I graduated high school in 2010. So, junior year, senior year was when the recession happened. And I remember at the time, I mean, I couldn't even get a job at Publix, like nowhere was hiring. Florida got hit probably the hardest in the entire country.
It did.
People don't
Nevada and
realize
Florida.
that. There's a lot of people that have moved here, but man, in 2009 and 10,
Forget that.
people forget that. We were hit hard.
It
And there was
scary.
no opportunities, but my mom was a realtor. So I kind of was at least keen on what was happening in the market. And even me
Yeah.
being 17, 18, even a little bit younger, I realized, God, if I had money, that is a killer deal. Like
That's
I
right.
even knew at the time,
Yeah.
but I was so focused on, I think, what I didn't have. I was frustrated, like, oh, I would buy that, but I don't have the money.
Yeah,
Raising
it
money
is.
wasn't even a part of my equation. Now I know that that's how most deals are done.
Yep.
Most deals are with partnerships and with raising money. Shit, the bank is going to give you most of the money. That's not you, right?
That's right.
So now that's shifted, I've learned that. But at the time, I was so stuck on that. You really, it sounds like very early on, realized the value of raising money in partnerships. Is that something that you learned yourself, or did you have a mentor when you were younger that was guiding you through this?
Yeah, great question. I think it certainly ties back to mindset. And like, I'm going to look at this, I'm going to figure it out. I figured a lot of it out on my own, but at the same time, I highly valued mentors. And when someone's willing to help me and I reach out to them with humble and say, hey, congratulations, look at what you like, can we work together or whatnot? And people will often, if you approach them right, people will often send the elevator down and help you, especially when they're later in their career and they've done successful. People want to do good for the world and kind of grow abundance mentality for all. But in that situation, you ask about like younger guy hacks and ways that things that work. I would always still end those conversations with, what can I do to help your business? What in particular can I do? And if someone mentioned a problem, I'll bend over backwards to solve that problem for a relationship.
Yeah,
And
that's where the value
And I
lies.
still do that at this point with portfolio of some hundreds of millions of assets. I still will continually try to help those people that have been there for the long time relationship.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. Create value. Because it's all you can do when you're young. You don't have money and you don't have expertise.
Yep.
But you can provide value. So you do the celebration deal. You buy the cold storage down south in South Florida. You're clearly targeting distressed assets.
Yep.
But strategically. What was that strategy at the time? Were you market specific or were you very opportunistic? Whatever made sense.
Yeah.
You bought.
At that point in dealing with the distressed assets, the number one mindset was, do you believe Florida is going to come back? Yes. Do you believe these major markets or major highways in Florida are going to benefit from that? Yes. And if you're buying something at 50 cents in the dollar, based on that, the rest you're going to have to figure out.
Was there sentiment that Florida would not come back at the time?
Not to me.
Yeah.
But I do remember between 9 and 13, 12, call it 12, it was pretty scary. We've talked about, and you visited my office in Channelside, right? Those assets, a lot of those I bought from banks as condos that were once 500,000-600,000, dropped to 100,000, 250,000, but there was no HOA in place. So I literally remember buying a condo in the Meridian building, which is a gorgeous 4-story, 5-story building across from Victory Lofts, the heart of Channelside. I love the building, exposed, high duct. That I ended up living in it for a long time. I bought it went from $700,000 to $150,000. And I had some guys at Colliers from the smarter organizations in Tampa telling me, don't buy condos in Channelside. You're nuts. And I said, no way. 16,000 square feet, exposed, 20-foot ceilings, downtown view. So at that point, I literally had $50,000. It was a $150,000 condo. And I went and got 100 in debt and bought that thing. It's now worth $700,000 or $800,000. I just rented it out for $5,000 a month.
$5,000 a month.
Which, as an aside, is big. But you're like Water Street all of a sudden went from $3,500 for a 2-2 to $5,500. It's just
I know, it's
completely nuts.
Well, the thing about, I think any pessimist over the last few decades in Florida has been proven wrong, which I'm learning too as I get older. in just digging deeper into real estate, everyone's always wrong about real estate. There's no
It's hard.
predictor, but if you look over a long period of time, boy, things go up. But I also think it's economics. I mean, take Florida, we have 23 million people.
Yep.
We know there's an incredible amount of people moving here. We know the 2030 metric is, I think, 28 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, prices are going up. If there's going to be millions of more people living here, I don't care how much you build. You can't build enough for that many people. You can't build enough units fast enough. So
We're
so
fortunate.
if I think kind of what you're saying is faith in the market is so important as an investor. At the end of the day, you got to have faith in where you're buying. If you think, oh, it's a bad idea to buy condos here, or oh, this market's going to tank, or I don't believe in the long term, then forget it. You might as well move somewhere else.
You might as well. And by the way, it starts. I give a lot of credit. I give the vast majority of credit to Bless America. I am business calls all the time making a joke about Bless America. Thank you, because it has given us an amazing platform. And if you show up in this country, you work hard, you have some reasonable strategy, and you work to execute that, this country is incredibly forgiving. And so you start at that level, and then you look at, and I was born in Florida. While I lived in New York for 8 years, part-time back and forth, I always knew Florida's my home, my family, where I want to add value and develop in these different markets throughout the state. So once I had those things determined, this is going to be my life strategy and plan, is to add value, and at some point politics it makes it really clear when there's things go on sale and there's distress that this will, if you believe in America, and you said it right before, you're alluding to that real estate will go up in the long run. If you look at the technical analysis charts, in the long run, real estate has grown, and so have stocks. And they've grown at they go up and down, but it is a line. So the key is just getting in the game, and then having a strategy, and then going to execute that.
Getting in the game and sustaining yourself in that game.
Very well said.
So
well said.
So low leverage, value add, whatever things you can do to hedge long term.
That's
hey,
right.
I bought this property. I've got a well-paying tenant. I can be comfortable here for a decade. You'll probably be okay. I think when people get into deals that they might not be able to afford and they're over leveraged, that's where problems occur.
Don't go nuts on 1 or 2 or 3 deals. Singles, doubles, grow at a healthy, sustainable rate.
Low and
Never
slow.
take so much risk that you could lose everything or put your investors or your team in a bad spot. You got to build a good team. It's credibility and integrity.
100%. So your career right now, putting that aside, when you were coming up, right? Early 2000s to 2018, somewhere in that 18-year time period. What were the risky parts of your business? Because I know you're doing some speculative development, a lot of it, right? So how did you get through that headspace? Now it's different. Now the market's kind of proven itself. We've came a long way since 2008.
Yep.
2015 was a different story.
2015 was a different story. Yep. Oh, that's a great question. So at that point, the way that I looked at it, and I still recommend this as a philosophy, is you have different forms of income. I've heard the rich dad, poor dad, these different things about multiples. Well, simply you have earned income or ordinary income, and then you have appreciation or capital gains in that bucket from investments. I've always tried to grow both of those at reasonably commensurate rates. And the idea, and so at that point I'd mentioned I moved to New York. Well, in New York City, I took the net lease brokerage advisory debt equity investment sale business and moved up to Manhattan. And we partnered with a little group that eventually merged in with Stan Johnson Company that's now acquired by Northmark. And we had this little space on Madison Ave I was super proud of as a Floridian. You can imagine, we grew up wearing flip-flops, you and I both. And so I'm on Madison Avenue, and we're hiring these young guys. We're just talking about this one super specialized raising debt and equity for single-tenant transactions. So you see a Walgreens, somebody had to build that. But before they had to build it, Walgreens said, hey, I'll give you a 20-year lease if you find me a nice corner that looks and feels like this and build me a building that's this size. So we were working with developers and business operators to do single-tenant net lease capital markets, and that business in New York picked up pretty well.
How old were you at that time?
That was 2012. So that'd be what? 12 years ago now. So very late 20s, early 30s. And I was scared to death moving to Manhattan, to be clear. But I'd heard if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. But sure enough, when you move up there as a Floridian, And you're learning, and the people, it's different. It's third, fourth generation money. I mean, there's a way about life in the Northeast because they're more established markets, right? Florida came up in the last 100 years. Well, there it's a little bit more generational.
Right.
And the joke that I make is I remember kind of having driven all the way up there, parked the car, my eyes tired. There was rats running as I'm unloading my stuff out of the car. The first 30 days in New York, something went wrong every day. If you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Well, like I've made that mistake. I won't make that mistake again. I'd owned several properties and had businesses in Florida. The leasing agent says to me, Josh, you're not from the city. We can't rent to you. What do you mean? I have perfect credit. I have some income. This is that. You have to pay the full year rent up front. Like that was just being late 20s. I literally, Garrett, I cut a check. I'll never forget. Cut a check for $40-something thousand to pay for 1 year of rent in a little place.
It's crazy
in
they
Midtown
made you
Manhattan.
do that. Why? What was the thought? You were a risky tenant?
In New York City, the vacancy, it still is. At the time, it's just so low for residential real estate. They want just all this ridiculous background and local. And the fact that I told them the truth is, I moved up here to start a business.
They're like, bro, you just got out of the car on a 18-hour road trip.
And I'm here to sign.
You sure you're going to pay us next month?
That's right. But that's the point that you make is how you respond to anything's how you respond to everything. I'm like, all right, I can feel this. And this is why people leave New York City pretty quick too. Or I can respond positively, solve it, and get to work.
I offered that as leverage to my last landlord. I said, it was a competitive house on Davis Islands. And
Smart.
I said, hey, I'll pay you a year up front. I'm ready to roll. I got a pregnant wife. I need this. Like, I'll pay you. And he had a completely different mindset. He said, oh, it's usually a little more risky. Usually those are bad tenants when they offer to pay a year up front. And I thought, never heard that one before. All right.
Bad tenants.
Yeah. So I paid him monthly. Okay. That works for me.
Bad tenants.
Yeah.
Anyone that's sitting on a year's worth of liquidity at one time, it's hard to.
That's what I thought.
Now
he didn't see it that way.
In a theory, you gotta, like you're in prison or something, like there's like a one-off scenario. You happen to have a lot of, you showed up with a bag of cash.
With purple stains all over it.
You have a resume and your name. You have business around town. That's a strange. I did once. I have a building in downtown Jacksonville. It's a 40,000 square foot school that I bought from the Boys and Girls Club. In the middle of COVID, they wanted to change and consolidate facilities. There's this old building, and I used to show up on Halloween, and I'd go to Family Dollar. It's a rougher neighborhood, historic Springfield, north of downtown. It's a great neighborhood. It's like Ybor, but it's rough in certain spots. But I'd go to the Family Dollar. I'd buy bags of masks. You know, at Family Dollar, they'll sell a kid's mask for $1, like an orange one with a strap. I'd show up with that and drop in the front at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon and watch all the kids run out and get masked because they didn't have Halloween stuff because it's like I said, it's a rough neighborhood. And I did that. And on Christmas, I do the same thing, put on a Santa hat and go drop footballs. Well, so the CFO came out one day. He's like, you're the guy that renovates all these old properties and this and that. And he told me they were moving. And he said, look, I've got this. It's 36,000 square feet with 2 other buildings, school. We need to get our money out really quick for this other facility. Would you like to buy it? And I ended up buying it from him. And I'd never owned a school before. We talked about the opportunistic, some of that stuff. But I felt like the number was good. I believed in the neighborhood. I had some other properties in the area. So I was making it nice. So this Real Estate 101, I put it on LoopNet right away. School for release. I fixed the roof. I spent some money on it, this and that. I had a 305 phone number. I was doing my own leasing because it was my own investment. Sometimes I'll hire brokers at this point in the career, and other times you do it yourself. 305. She says, I ask her how many schools she's run. She gives me a little bit of a vague answer. Ends up saying to me, Josh, would this credit conversation stop if I prepay a year of rent? Well, actually, it would. Signed a lease, gave her the key. I didn't actually give her the keys. I gave the contractor the keys, and she got the keys. She moved in, didn't end up paying. So there are those scenarios. Now I'm on the second tenant, as you can imagine, after a little bit challenging process with development, and the current tenant is working to build up her business and is a better credit.
Do you feel like owning a rental portfolio, whether it's commercial real estate, condos, single family homes, can help hedge some of those risks in speculative investments like that? Don't you got to have a little cash flow coming in, because if a tenant does that and doesn't pay, really, really quickly over the course of 3-6 months, you're going to be boom, 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 just bleeding.
And you tell the tenant on the phone, I'd like to work with you, and I will work with you some in certain areas, but my bank's not going to work with me on the mortgage payment. The taxes have to be in.
That's a great excuse.
The insurance has to be in.
Banker. Yeah.
I've never had a banker say, well, the only time I actually ever had a banker say that we'll consider was March, April, the middle of COVID. I had a couple of private lenders, but historically, as we all know, banks don't do that, and they shouldn't. They're paid 4 to 8%. Like, they're a low return business. Banks are the best partners because the amount of capital they'll give you at such a low rate, and what small and regional banks do for guys like us, so I don't blame the
And they
banks.
take
Won't
no
entertain.
equity too. That's the best partner ever.
It really is. And they have such a great place. And of course, the Wells Fargo's, the Bank of America's, JP, those firms now focus on big bulge bracket business, as they should. But when you look at the regional and the small banks, so vital. I'm so appreciative.
Me too. It's split up, it seems. I mean, again, I'm only a little bit into my career. I'm younger than you are, but has that shifted? Like, when you first started, were there still these small regional banks that were servicing guys like us, and then these larger institutions? Or 20 years ago, would Bank of America service me?
And if you ask a Bank of America bank, like
Oh, I
street
did.
level
They
banker,
laughed me out of the.
some of them will act like it and this, but you'll end up not getting it through.
Yeah.
And by the way, like, residential loan with Bank of America is maybe different than a $1 to $5 million small commercial loan. With something in the $1 to $20 million small commercial, your regional and local banks, in my experience, you're going to do a lot better.
Their appetite is always higher for
whether you're
something
buying
like
a
that.
business or buying a building, those groups are going to do better servicing because they see value in those clients.
That's
while
always been the
large
case. It
banks,
just seems like, I don't know, regional banks have been popping up left and right.
I think
it
it's
seems.
happened. I think it's happening. The dichotomy between the two is happening more, and that the big only want to play with the big.
Yeah.
But you also have to realize the history of America. The M&A activity within the banking sector is off the charts.
Right.
The amount of banks now relative to 50 years ago is insane. How many they've just been buying and rolling each other up.
Yeah. And I was working with a bank out of Sarasota when I first got my little portfolio started, and they gave me a little line of credit to purchase more units in this particular community. Well, it was fantastic. I was 27 at the time, kind of getting this portfolio going, building a relationship with a bank. They ended up selling to a slightly larger regional bank. And so that relationship I had built over a year and a half with that banker, I mean, he emailed me one day and said, "Hey, I'm retiring, bank's being sold, here's your new guy to contact." But it's not the same,
It's not the same.
Banking,
Unfortunately, that does happen sometimes.
the debt part of real estate is something that I think is the most ambiguous and hard to understand, for me at least, in my journey. And I think it's for that reason. You got to build those. You got to stick with a bank and build those relationships. That's so important.
You absolutely, and you have to have several banks. And it's okay. The bankers understand that you have different banks. We have a bank with 3 locations that does our $500,000 to $5 million deals. And then we got a larger regional bank up the East Coast that does our $10 to $20 million deals with a lease attached to it. And then there's banks that are known to be land and residential banks. And you have good relationships with all of them. You have to value that first. But I hear you on your story. It's sad. I have one deal story where SunTrust and BB&T, if you remember, about 2 years ago, they merged and became Truist.
Yep.
And Truist is a different animal than the two of those individual pieces. BB&T and I had a great relationship, and I had a banker that we built that storage facility I mentioned earlier, a $7.4 million loan on an asset that we eventually sold at 19. But when it was leasing up and we finished the construction, the merger happened. And one day my banker called me, and we were just getting to a point where we covered our debt service coverage ratio. So your NOI relative to your debt creates your DSCR ratio, and the banks live by those when they need to or want to. But we weren't quite to the 1.2 ratio that's so common. And my banker called and said, "Josh, I'm sorry, I'm no longer your banker because of the merger." I'm like, "Well, I'll never forget, her name was Issa. But Issa, you had sent me an email about 2 months ago promising me a 12-month extension." "Josh, I'm sorry, the file is no longer mine." And there's some new, I jokingly call him a corporate raider. I mean, as a real estate developer, I still, like I said, I love the banking business, so I make that joke. But this gentleman called me and he said, "Josh," he's pretty direct. He goes, "We have too much storage. BB&T had too much storage, and you're a small loan for us. We're now Truist, and we want to do business with a different customer, candidly. And he forced me out of the bank.
Whoa.
And I was making payments on time. I have perfect credit. I have a great portfolio, I have great track record. And so for no reasons, you talk about risks and risks you control and can't control, for reasons that couldn't have reasonably been controlled. Like I said, I had an email from the bank saying we're going to extend the loan out. But all of a sudden I was in a tricky situation. And we had to quickly work to refinance and ultimately ended up selling it.
Wow. So that was your way out, was immediately get on the phone with any other regional bank that would take the call and do the deal. I mean, now, how the hell can they do that? Don't you have something signed on a loan that size that?
It's a great question, Garrett. You're spot on. But when you come to the end of a construction period, your construction loan is designed to get you through that and get you a little bit of lease
That's
up.
where that extension comes in.
That's
which Truist was not willing to do.
And you can either do a mini perm or you go back to the bank and roll into permanent financing. And sometimes it's a different bucket of money. The construction money is a certain type of lender and bucket of money. And they expect you to refinance or go into that at that point. But yeah, to your point, she was watching my monthly financial growth. And at that point, we had 686 storage units. I'll never forget this number. When we finished the building, I was like, this is beautiful. I'm looking at the rent roll. Oh my God, I have to get 686 leases?
Right.
That's insane. Some of them are now 10 by 10 or 20 by 20 or these spaces. But it started filling up. We threw a grand opening party and we're out there promoting. I'll never forget. I had several projects going on, but I'm going around the neighborhood in front of the Publix, handing out flyers. We had Chick-fil-A. We had a bouncy house. I need to fill this building up because I had investors, I had banks, I had that. But yeah, once we filled it up, she felt really bad that they couldn't do the 12-month extension. So I was, we were scrambling.
Damn, you were handing out flyers to get that thing filled up. That's amazing.
That's the level of grit it takes.
That seems to be so unique to what you do. I mean, maybe not. Are there a lot of guys in that niche, in that space, that operate, sounds like a $7 to $10 million deal? Do typically guys do that?
No,
or do you feel
no. And by the way, I hired a group of people. And then I had people from my office that were helping. It was
a team effort.
It was the day of the event. It was a team effort.
Yeah.
But the best leader leads by showing that I'm not going to ask you to do anything I'm not willing to do. So if I'm asking you to do this, and by the way, I'll just talk about results for a second. CubeSmart is the second largest management company in the country behind Extra. They go kind of back and forth for 1 and 2, I believe, in Public Storage, a few other. CubeSmart's number one record for units leased in a day on day one grand opening was 8 units. 8 units in a grand opening day, the first day of a business being open, they leased 8 units.
That's it?
Out of 1,400 locations, that was their number one day one. I know because I was asking them, because I called them 2 days before and I said, I don't want 2 reps working that day. I want 4 people with iPads and I want your sharpest. Like, why? And I'm like, because I'm on social media. We're doing e-blast. I've got people passing out flyers in the neighborhood of Celebration. Celebration's a little community next to downtown Orlando. It's where Disney's master plan community. We leased 28 units.
Holy shit. You blew past the record.
We blew past the record.
Now the tenant landlord structure there was CubeSmart the tenant, or you were almost like a franchisee? Like how did that?
Great question. We own the building. We built and owned the building.
Okay.
And you hire CubeSmart as a manager.
Oh, interesting. I didn't
and
know
they
it
take a
like
percentage of the revenue and you pay the payroll. Yeah.
Oh, so it's almost like a brand you're attaching your storage facility to.
Well said. The brand is important. Now, if you look at those companies, they own half of their units and half of them are third-party services. We were a third-party service.
Very interesting. So you're using the brand, you're using this already established management company. They obviously know their shit.
Yeah.
I mean, how many storage units have they leased and owned?
1,400 is their portfolio.
1,400?
Yep. So you're hiring them because they've done it before.
1,400 properties, not
properties.
properties.
Oh, yeah, I see your point.
So
1,400
units,
times
I mean.
700, yeah.
I mean, could be 50, 60, 80, 100,000 storage units.
And they're turning them over all the time. They're machines, and it's a very impressive business model.
So having them there, they were the kind of boots on the ground to help you get it leased up, right? You're the landlord. They're kind of this brand They don't have an ownership, but they're a management company. Interesting. I didn't know it worked like that. So you blew them out of the water. Did corporate email you like, hey, Josh, we want you to come work for us actually as the leasing president?
They want that in a different way. They want us to go develop other facilities
Ah.
and then let them come manage. But I did get an email because I was receiving some slack because I wanted multiple people to be there versus their recommended allocation. And then ultimately, I still have photos. There's some on my website or social with a line around the corner and the Dunkin' Donuts. We had the Chick-fil-A cow and like the bouncy house and coupons and barbecue and a DJ. But that's what it takes. I had 686 units to lease up. That's what it takes.
Well, and then did you have the information about your loan not being renewed at that time? So did you have that pressure behind you?
No, that was maybe 6 months later because we'd mostly filled up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was a stressful couple of months.
Did you use that story to the next banker and say, look at the effort I've put in? Yes.
Yep. We found the land. We bought it distressed. We got the construction drawings. We spent all the money on that and did all the
look at our efforts to get this
and
thing
look at our
leased up.
efforts. Absolutely.
Wow.
You tell that. And there's some great bankers with some great discretion in this particular situation. It was a portfolio level decision way above my pay grade that went down a few levels and our loan was gone from the bank. So we had to do what we had to do, which is typical. You refinance and sell.
Amazing. And then held on to that for, sounds like, however long you had to, and sold it for an incredible profit.
Yeah, it was a nice exit, and you have partners and banks and different things in
of course.
there. So people hear the numbers and like, oh my God, well, you raise money.
Sounds like everyone did well.
It was a group. Yeah, there's actually a group from South Tampa that was a capital partner. Good guys that we got it done with.
Fantastic. And then you still own this other parcel. What's the plan for the other parcel there?
Right now, we're looking at trying to figure out, does a hotel, apartment, or a build-to-suit work best for it.
Sounds like you've got options on that site right off I-4.
It's on I-4. Yeah, you can see it when you drive by.
It's crazy how the Orlando market's blowing up as well. People think Tampa, obviously around here, that's all we talk about. But boy, Orlando's growing massively.
And Orlando's been growing heavy and steady for a long time. I feel like Tampa's explosion in the last 5 years has just been really fun. Maybe that's because we're Tampanians, but it's been a ton of fun. While the Orlando growth has been long and strong for a while. I personally prefer it here. But look, you look at South Florida. South Florida's like New York City now. Miami's more expensive in a lot of ways than New York. And that inflow, and I even, you've heard me a lot talk about, I believe that South Florida went up. Tampa area's obviously gone a lot up. And the rest of the state, Jacksonville, Ocala, those markets are going to continue to grow up too.
Let's talk about your philosophy on urban markets. You've been a really big advocate and very bullish on urban cores.
Yeah.
You love urban cores. I mean, we've talked about that offline.
Yeah.
You really believe in, I'll say, the resurgence of the American downtown.
That's right.
Just to kind of put it plainly.
Yeah.
Why is that? And then where are you focused and what products do you have going on in those urban markets?
Yeah. I personally enjoy the work-live community around an urban core in downtown. Now, I grew up in a smaller beach town north of Daytona, so the city was really cool to me. Living in New York City was cool. I'm a big advocate of traveling internationally throughout other cool cities in the States and learning about their urban core. That's just a fundamental part of who I am and what I enjoy. On the counter argument, you got to think about it. Okay, let's step back and look at it. Why did Americans and why do people historically have kids? Because they own farms. And if you own a farm, you need labor. And so if you bang out 3, 10 kids, that's totally a good strategy because they're accretive to your portfolio and your farm business, right? Well, now humans are not stupid, okay? Now humans are living back in the cities and we're not having as many kids. And that's a whole different discussion about how challenging that is, like China, Europe, America. We're feeling it. We're still growing. But here, Elon Musk talk about, it's a problem how quickly we're slowing down having kids. Well, that's because you're living in urban cores. Right. You don't need the labor. And we're smart. And we have freedom and accessibility and all these crazy things that the internet and free information, the speed of information give that are stressful and this and that. I can talk about the pros and cons at different time. But yeah, that's but I've always personally loved the city. It's It's fascinating.
There's an energy to it that's fun, and I think you can feel that energy in Tampa a little bit. We've got a metropolitan vibe to us. We've got that a central business district, and it really
Now,
feels like it.
it really feels like it
People are
now.
suited up, walking around. There's a buzz, and that I think has always existed in downtown Tampa. The difference was at 5:01 it would clear out.
That's right.
Not that long ago, and now it's this really 24/7 neighborhood.
And I remember it, and I've loved the ride. I mentioned earlier, having lived in Sky Point and Element and being involved in the Uptown Council of Downtown, when Franklin Street wasn't even there, and it was the first time there was real properties downtown Tampa. And I ended up moving from there to Channel District when all those units went on sale. And I still have my office since 2013, and my office has been a Victory Lofts building. But I became an advocate of Channel Side, and I've always been an advocate of Ybor. But when the trolley was connecting those two, went over there. But the whole urban Tampa, seeing it turn the corner relative to where it is now is just incredible. It has obviously so much momentum. There was a time that I knew every mid or high rise going on in Tampa, and I was studying passion. Right now, when you look online,
Right.
you can even if you're in the industry, you can't keep track of all the mid and high rises.
It's unbelievable. Tampa tomorrow put up like $20 billion in construction.
I saw that. It's awesome.
That is such a crazy number. And what's really even crazier is if you look at the groups behind a lot of that capital, it's not from here. That's what's exciting.
It's exciting, and also as a mid-career energetic developer, it's disappointing. Sometimes things are right under your nose. Like the whole time I've known and seen this, but like there's just so much more we should have done. Having Related come in and kick our butt as a Tampa developer is a little bit like, all right, they are the 100-pound gorilla. They dominated South Florida. They're coming in here, and they're just. But you're right. Like Coulter, there's just so many groups. Obviously, I'm very excited. We got Kettler as a partner in Gasworx. But all these groups are coming in, and sometimes you'll see groups from all over the country come in and do one big project. Right. And that's what you're seeing with some of those other high rises.
There's a lot of that, it seems. Yeah.
Just one
Silverstein
big deal
from New York coming down and doing that tower in northern downtown Tampa. Yeah.
One Tampa guys,
I guess
super cool.
It's exciting to see the new investors here.
It is.
But it's a challenge for some of the natives. It's a challenge.
But it shouldn't be. It's our own self. This is way too hot. This is way too expensive. Tampa, and we're all guilty of it. When you're from a market, you're skeptical of what that market can do. When I go to a new city and I buy a property, you guys are missing it. It's like right under your nose. Like this is all going to happen.
Right.
But the locals that have lived there for 40, 50 years are jaded.
Yes.
They're jaded. You're like, no, Ybor's never going to be good. I'm like, no. Mark my word. It's going to be good, and we're going to make it good.
We're looking at doing a high-end flip remodel in Sarasota. They're asking $1.5 million for the home. The home, when this community was developed, I think sold for like $300,000. It's a big, beautiful, like 3,600 square foot, one-story home. The agent has lived in the neighborhood for 25 years. So in her head, she's like, this is crazy overpriced. I don't see the value here, right? She has this jaded backwards position.
Yep.
But then you have these couples from California coming in going, oh my God, this is a steal. This is on sale. So there's two worlds at play here, really. Yeah. And even for me, like a guy who's so optimistic about Tampa, the fucking podcast is Tampa Bay Developer. This is my life. I'm disappointed too, man. Like I'm trying to get started in my real estate career, and some shit that I could have bought 5 years ago, I could have afforded now, but now I can't because of these outside investors. I get it. It is a workaround though. And I think that the edge we have as business people that are from here is that maybe we have a larger context to grab information
but from. We got to take that filter off. And you asked earlier about it.
You can't have blinders on,
you
for
can't
sure.
have the blinders. And how you see something, your perception is your reality. So if you feel like that building on Florida that you could have bought for $300,000 is now $1 million and that's ridiculous, you could look at it that way. And a lot of people do. And we're looking at projects right now and I struggle with it. On the flip side, you can go to Brickell or you go to Miami Beach, or you can go to some of those areas where they had a building that was 200, it became $1 million, and now it's 7 in Wynwood. Or you could look at Florida Avenue in Nebraska and say, no, is it really possible?
That's so true. We had Eddie Avila on. What did he
Yeah.
say, Tyler? He bought that site in Brickell for, I think he said it was late 70s, like 1978. What did he pay, like 800 grand for that site on the water, and built those 3 condo towers? I mean,
Wow.
talk about a perspective.
Yeah.
Now I think he's in his 70s. Obviously, he's older, and he's been developing in Florida for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Imagine what a guy like that thinks about the future and what
Yeah.
the next generation will pay for some of these
For some of these
properties.
things.
That's another thing too, Josh. Do you think that there's a limit? Do you think that there's a cap to the price level in real estate? I guess more broadly as a whole, stocks can split, right? That's how they ease their
Their
cost.
cost.
Is a regular home in South Tampa going to be $6 million in the year 2100? Like, is there a line?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because you have inflation continually going on, you have natural growth going on, you have compensation and entrepreneurial gains growing while your properties are growing. Now, look, we've all seen the charts. The price of a home relative to the average salary, that disparity has changed a lot. Something like in the 50s, it was maybe 6 years worth of an average salary to own a home. And now, like I'm giving you just an example, it's maybe it's 20 years of work to own a home. So the price of real estate and assets have gone up faster than earnings, and that's why there's a whole lot of discussion
Yeah.
and challenges about it. But now to answer your question, I think it has to keep going up because of simple supply and demand. It's just only so much real estate in America and Florida and Tampa.
As long as they keep printing money.
Yeah,
And loaning it. I think debt is a large part of this conversation. When they start to talk about the 40-year and 50-year mortgages, when they start to do financing, that's going to require less money down. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because the more affordable you make real estate, that's great news for low-income, middle-income Americans. It's awesome that they have a chance that they otherwise wouldn't have. But the other side of that sword is now it's going to be more expensive for everyone. And then you go backwards and you say, well, now we'll make the debt easier to get. Well, now it's more expensive. And then you keep having this back and forth. We've seen the same thing in this country with the school system. School was very unaffordable. Universities were very unaffordable for low-income people. Well, let's have a guaranteed federal program that can get a loan to go to school. Well, now if everyone can afford it, now the price level increases. So, and that's what you have.
Bless America, though.
Yeah. I mean, bless America. The good news is this country will keep figuring out opportunities until the whole thing collapses. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
And hopefully what America's done a good job through its short history is correcting, sometimes overcorrecting. We can almost joke, if you look at the series of presidents and their style and their demeanor, it's almost like the country chooses the opposite.
Oh, absolutely.
And it goes back and forth.
There is a pendulum.
But at the same time, it's just a totally different world, and the speed of information and how people are reacting. As long as we show up every day and we keep doing what we're doing, which is creating value, paying taxes, voting, just doing the right things.
Paying attention. I think the good news in all the BS happening at the federal level politically. I think the good news in all of that is people are starting to realize, oh wait, maybe it matters who we elect. Maybe I should get in the voting booth and cast my vote, especially locally. I think people now more than ever realize, wait, local elections matter. Like I need to get to the poll and put the right people in place. That's something we can't disrespect. That's how the whole thing unravels is people think it's a clown show and they don't get involved.
I was asked once, what are things that you can actually do for society, or what's the point of life, those different things. And when I just stepped back and I thought about it, I said, well, you create a family. You're a builder. No matter what, we're all builders. Men, women, humans, we're builders. We either build a family, or you can build a business, or you can build a building, build infrastructure like a bridge, or you can build legislation. Create legislation that lasts beyond you, that modernizes it to the date. So I personally am fascinated in politics for later in the career, enjoying everything all the great stuff that's happening now. But I think about that. If you could leave legislation behind, it makes the country just a little bit little bit stronger. What a great thing to get done.
100%. Look at some of the laws that are in place that are famously named after politicians that
Yeah.
that wrote up incredible practices and policies that we use today.
Yep.
I know you have a call at 3:30. Let's talk now about today and
Yeah.
what you're up to today, what you're ambitious about, what you're targeting, and what exciting developments you have going on currently.
Yeah. Yeah. Right now, I look at it where there's a few different businesses, existing speculative land assets that are being converted, whether it's like the storage or the cold storage or selling 500 lots to D.R. Horton in Southwest Florida. That's an opportunistic, high risk, high return, different game. I have a single tenant build to suit business that does different types of specialty medical facilities and retail facilities. We're in Austin, Portland, Charlotte, Minneapolis. We just completed a surgery center for humans in Dayton, one in Orlando. And these are, call it 15, 20,000 square foot facilities with a single lease. And those are more, they're like, it's just consistent single delivering a service for someone almost in development.
Mm-hmm.
Excited about that. Excited about the urban cores. Obviously, you've been involved. We're talking about a lot of the stuff, exciting stuff in urban Tampa, Ybor, Channel Side, and the growth of all of that. And then really for me personally, I view myself as a Tampayan, but really a Floridian. So I've really enjoyed having some projects in South Florida, and projects in North Florida, and watching and just trying to step back and watch the whole state.
That's a cool
do its thing.
perspective. Just seeing all these different markets grow in their own way, watching these cities kind of create their own identity. Me growing up, I was born in 92, right? So by the time I got to high school, like I said earlier, that was the recession period. Real estate developments that were new, 06, 07, were so much more blander, I feel, than they are today. There was this suburban nature of everything that was happening.
Said.
There was a exodus of downtowns. I was born in Tampa. My family goes back a long way. My parents divorced, and I moved to Sarasota with my mom when I was 11, and I didn't move back to Tampa till after college. So I stayed middle school, high school, all that in Sarasota. Sarasota, nothing was happening when I was in high school. Now
it's nuts.
Oh my God. You talk about an urban market, this incredible beach town with coconut palm trees, white sandy beaches right over the bridge from downtown.
Gorgeous.
I
Yeah,
mean,
just so cool.
what a gem that place is. And look how fast
It's
things have
happening.
turned around. So you're at this statewide perspective. You've got projects in every major city.
Yep.
Where do you see things falling into place, say, decades down the road in terms of identity? What will Jacksonville become? What will Orlando become? How will these markets solidify?
I think there's two distinct camps, right? You're either really bullish on the state's trajectory based on the political and different overall economic trends and income tax free and all those things, quality of life, weather, those things. I will point out, you'd asked earlier, the only concerning trend that I'm seeing personally, I've got projects where insurance bill was $20,000 and now it's $60,000. The number of named storms and these overall catastrophes and how that's impacting the insurers, I'm watching that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching waterfront property. I'm watching these different things. Set that aside. Besides that, I can't see another thing that could really slow Florida's trajectory during our lifetime. And when I'm up in New York, I'll tell you, it's so funny. I go up there and the high finance guy that used to be like, Josh, you're from Florida. Florida's not for me. That same guy's like, so St. Pete's pretty cool, huh, Josh? And I'm like, yeah, downtown St. Pete's actually awesome.
I hear it's
amazing
warm down there, right?
Quality of life. Yeah, there's nothing crazy going on. The crime's lower, the income tax free, the weather. But now I think that all the urban markets in Florida are going to do really well. All the major markets. I also think what's fascinating to me are the home prices and the development. You mentioned the 70s, 80s, 90s. I think after World War II, suburbia was a really good idea. Let's make long roads, give people a house and a yard,
Right.
these different things. And then now I think that's still going on. There's still great properties out there, of course. But the vibrance and the energy of the urban core, I think it's part of a demographic of the new generations.
Yeah.
Appreciating the culture and relationships and dexterity of being downtown. The other part of it's the in-migration, right? You got people with money moving in that want the edgy, exciting thing.
That are from some of those other markets, right? I mean,
That's right.
someone from Manhattan's probably not going to move here and go stick their hat in Lakewood Ranch. They're probably going to go to an urban core and live a similar lifestyle. Also, too, I've thought maybe social media, maybe with the advent of some of the new internet technologies, maybe people want to be around other people in urban cores and don't want to live so far out. That could, because think about how quick the shift was from suburban to urban and the resurgence of downtowns. 10 years, 15 years. I mean, it's not like it's taken 30 years. These things are very quick.
It's a quality of life. It's expectation, though. You have folks that are empty nesters that are moving back to downtown. And then you have the new gen that work, live, play. I leave my unit in Channelside. I go across the unit to my office in Channelside. I have my electric scooters for the whole team. If I need to zip to Ybor, zip downtown, half the time I'm showing up on an electric scooter, and it's just a cool, fun quality of life.
Did you scooter here today?
I didn't.
It's too hot. It's too hot this time of year. That's the thing. It's so damn hot. You know, New York is like beautiful this time of year. Chicago's fantastic, but boy, it gets hot in Florida. We're going to have to put up some extra trees or some shade along the sidewalk. I don't know.
Innovation will help.
Yeah, there we go.
Calm that down.
So let's jump into Gasworx, the future of Tampa's urban core.
Yeah.
I believe that once Gasworx is complete, here it is on the screen. Once this is all filled in and we get residents and businesses and people on the streets walking around and enjoying, I think this is really the catalyst of new Tampa, because it mixes the old and the new. And when people visit Gasworx, they'll get a sense of both of those things. They'll get a sense of the brick and the trolley and the chickens and the Ybor, right?
Tampa is.
The cafe con leches and the Cuban sandwiches, but then they'll also be surrounded by beautiful new buildings and some new ideas and you know, new restaurant concepts and all that sort of stuff. So to me, this is a huge tipping point in Tampa's journey as a city. Now you worked with Daryl a long time ago in his business. How did you meet and what did you do for him, and how did that lead you to working on this project here?
Yeah, I don't know, probably closer to 15 years ago now, he had a separate Tampa-based business that was with family-based, doing extremely well and growing that nationally. And we'd started working on projects to help expand that and roll that out. And you know, it was fun watching a small, medium-sized business just running and gunning. And you know, he's such a great guy. Out of people that you do business with, and you just recognize, like, winners can win while being winners along the way. And I literally would say that in the bullpen in New York City, I would literally tell people, look, like, a strategy is doing business with good people and doing good business and caring and creating and selecting who you do business with. And he really epitomized that. And so there's a ton of success and great things over a decade. And then I remember when he exited that business, and it was very, very exciting. It was sad, but exciting. It was just a different chapter. And I just remember, because I think he knew that I had some properties in Ybor, and he shared his first story of an Ybor deal before that business's rollout. And I want to say he's even born there. And I said, yeah, no. He said, I want to invest some money in Ybor. I said, oh, that's great. He's very humble, but very focused. I think I'm going to invest a lot of money in Ybor. And then I was splitting time between New York and Tampa at the time, and just quietly watching him acquire up a big portion of Ybor. And of course, at that time, you never knew just how great and what these things would come out of it, from an individual strategy of picking up individual properties to picking up large clusters of land that's now the future Gasworx site.
One day maybe he'll get on the show and give me his perspective himself. But how long are we in the Gasworx process? It sounds like the land acquisition started a while ago, a decade or so ago.
No.
Close to 8 years.
Close to
8, yeah.
Yeah, 8 years. And it started with the individual properties, and then has, of course, grown from there, and then grown to recognizing that Ybor Harbor is, you got to start these kind of projects. You got to start way out,
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the acquisition, the entitlement, the design,
Well, look
the
at
construction, it's 10 plus years all day. But you're building a city within a city.
Literally.
This is the way that I explain it is this is commensurate with the excitement and density and impressive nature of Water Street. It's just done in between Ybor and Channelside, which to me is almost a better piece to Tampa's puzzle because it's going to pull in that Ybor history, as you mentioned, and that's going to make it truly unique. And now Channelside's almost filled out, and you got the trolley, and then you have, I know your guest from not too long ago was talking about how the Riverwalk is going to wrap through and go up in there, and it's done. Once these things happen, Tampa's totally on the map.
Yeah, Kimberly Curtis. She's the chair of the Channelside CRA and also is the owner-operator of the Gasworx Gold's Gym, which just opened, which is super exciting. So she's keen on this growth. She's been a Channelside resident for years. I mean, talk about someone who not only is an advocate for the community, but a part of the community. She lives there, just like you. You've watched it grow since the recession, and it's so exciting. And then to see the renderings and the scale of what's to come is incredible. David, do we have a top-down view of this project as we talk about it? There might be, you could probably Google it.
And that Gold's is awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
And I watched that come together, and I was talking to Daryl about it, and that area needs a gym, and that building is awesome for a gym.
Totally.
The amount of money they put into it and the challenges and the execution, but it's an adaptive reuse case study, which in my opinion is the coolest kind of real estate. That thing you talking about before, it's been through 2 or 3 different uses from the armory to a gym, and when you're in there, like I think you said in the show, it's totally unique experience.
It's totally.
I'm a proud new member. I signed up before it opened.
Good, me too.
Supporting the
Hell
momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a cool piece too, right? Right so where cool. It is, right in between the Selman Expressway, right in between Gasworx, Ybor, and Channelside.
I jog by it all the time. Bike by it before when it was nothing.
I've said it from the very beginning. That is a catalyst into pushing some of that retail north. Yeah. You're going to have people coming out of that gym wanting food, smoothies, a million different things, and they're going to look into Gasworx, right? That's the first place they're going to walk to receive those different things. Yeah, so here's the top down of Gasworx. How, first of all, do you have you're at Casa Marti is where you're helping place tenants, correct?
Yeah, and it's Marty, Gomez, Pedroso. It's generally considered West Ybor. If you take 7th and 8th and you're heading west and you go past, call it 15th, and you get where Hotel Hyatt is, that corridor all the way over to Nuccio Parkway is intentionally being rebranded, repositioned, reconsidered as West Ybor. And the idea is to have a little bit of an elevated, a little more quiet. Think of how West Village is in Manhattan to East Village. East Village is a little grittier, a little rowdier. It's where your entertainment, your jazz, that's 7th. Okay. And then West Ybor, it's gonna be a little more quiet, a little bit more quaint. There's already, a few hundred units up and leasing out very quickly. Beautiful little micro units in these new buildings, adding just what the area needs, which is density and young people spending money. And with that, you need services. And that is a piece to the puzzle. 7th Avenue's evolution. You've already seen some new restaurants opening up. That is going to find its new balance. Entertainment won't go away. And then all that's really doing is going to be complemented by Gasworx delivering 5,000 units, 500,000 square feet of office, of which there's already an anchor tenant placed with a Grow Financial. That's huge because that now is employment that's going to feed the residential, which is going to feed the retail. And then lastly, within all that Gasworx, it's all going to go to Adamo. And that, along with remember where the old projects were over Nuccio Parkway? That was rough. And how sad was that? You're driving through Tampa on the way downtown.
I know.
And it was just
welcome to
dilapidated.
Tampa.
Yeah. And it's right by the train station, which, by the way, is cool. And then you have the new line coming in. So all that now, La Union is about 90 days out from COing on a few hundred units. That's west of Nuccio Parkway.
So
the La
scroll up,
Union.
David. We where was it? It was the picture. Yeah, this skyscraper city right here. This map picture. That'll work on the left. Nope, back. Yeah. So for people just listening, as you go up Nucio Parkway, which is the angled road that kind of goes directly into Ybor City, on the left, those old Tampa Park apartments, those were kind of those housing projects. Those have been torn down, at
Yep.
least the southern portion.
Right.
Those are where those two new apartment buildings are being delivered.
That the vast majority of those have been torn down, right? Just the units in the north.
And how
yeah,
many
there's two new
units
buildings.
are going to be available?
Well, there's different phases. There's over 300 delivering right now, and then there's a couple hundred plus in West Ybor. The Pedroso building delivered and filled up already.
Wow.
That's over the restaurant space that we recorded in.
Mm-hmm.
That we're talking to groups from Tampa, New York, Miami about filling that up and being out in front of the Gasworx, and that's separate of the main. As you go up kind of Channel Side Drive, and you're taking first, second, third on the right-hand side to the main grid of Gasworx. If you want to scroll around a little bit more, we can pull it up. I'm trying to find the best.
That's a good map.
That one on the bottom right. Yeah.
So
that's a
this
clear one.
gives you kind of a top down. In fact, they actually have. There's the ground floor plan right there on the left.
That's La Union.
Yep.
On the west side of Nucio Parkway, and there's already some exciting tenant announcements in there. You got Duckweed. We've got a restaurant from Pinellas coming over. That's very
Here,
exciting.
remember to talk into the mic.
A restaurant from Pinellas coming over. That's a very exciting name that's about to be announced. And then those units on the west of Nucio Parkway have already delivered. And you see that pad that you have down there. There's going to be more units going there. And then eventually along Adamo will be high rises.
Now, how high are we talking in that area? What are the entitlements?
So great question, Garrett. If you're in historic Ybor and you're moving from 7th down the grid system, you still have height restrictions. And those buildings are going to be in accordance, but then it's going to turn to mid-rises. And then once you get along Adamo or Highway 60, you're out of the district.
Oh, okay.
And at that point,
so
40 stories.
Seventh, 6th, 5th, you're maybe talking 3, 4, 5 stories.
That's right.
Somewhere around that.
Yep.
And then as you approach, so where are we at? So 7th would be
7th would be the top
street.
Yep,
Got it.
Absolute
So 6th,
top.
5th, 4, 3, 2. First is the first block north of Adamo. So by the time you get down to Adamo, that's where like legitimate like skyscrapers will be.
So between Adamo as you go north, that first block will be skyscrapers.
David, can you pull up a full view? Maybe go back to the Gasworx website. See the full rendering. That's actually perfect on the left.
Yep.
Fox 13, Tampa Bay. On the left. Yeah. Look at that, man. Okay, so
Yes,
this
in
is
the
a
back, there's
perfect
the high
view.
rises.
So you can kind of see those high rises along the back. You've got downtown in the way background. And then those are some newer construction low rise in the historic district.
This is like being in a drone. Almost if you're in a drone, you're over 7th.
That would
shooting
be the
towards
view.
downtown, Water Street, Channel Side. That's kind of the view. But you can't see Channel Side or Water Street, which is crazy because there's so much development.
Look at that view. Unbelievable.
There you go.
It's wild to think at the changes. Just from my perspective, a lot of people know this story. I'm sorry if you've heard it before, but my family came here in the late 1800s. My great-great-grandmother rolled cigars in Ybor City. My great-grandmother was born in Ybor City. She used to tell me, she was 98 when she died. Her name was Evelyn. She used to tell me stories in Ybor City. They used to have a lamplighter, someone that would come around and light the oil lamps at night. This is before Ybor had electricity. So to hear my great-grandmother tell me that in person when I was a little boy in like the late 90s, and then I look at this image of what's to come, it blows me away. These changes are incredible. I welcome it because I think it's a resurgence of what once was great, which was this diverse, mixed-use, urban neighborhood, families enjoying different restaurants, different businesses and ideas, all supported by the cigar industry. And it's taken decades and decades and decades to get even to the point where we could create a concept like this, all thanks to Daryl's vision. So, boy, I'm excited about it. What Tell me, Josh, about the tenants you are approaching or have approached you to fill up these restaurant spaces. Is there excitement? Is there hesitation? What's the vibe? Because you kind of have
Yeah.
a job to sell this because it's so
It's the
new.
vision.
Yeah.
And by the as an aside, hearing the story about your grandmother gives me
Yeah.
goosebumps, right? Just thinking about that and picturing the lanterns being lit and realizing what we're working on now and how much that matters and how important it is to find that balance between honoring that history and that with doing everything responsibly to take it back to being the village that it should be with employment, with housing, with services, with retail. And that's a natural segue into thinking about smart ground floor retail placement and where do you put a little bit of office and medical, something we were talking about before, relative to this community? Well, you need that in a village, but you don't need it in certain areas. And so the excitement right now in West Ybor is really focused on a few of the existing buildings and a little bit more boutique existing space. While when you go into the new development, it's going to be several city blocks with mid-rises above it, even with an amazing focus on architecture and keeping the feel of Ybor. So the buildings first are extremely brick and metal, and they get a little bit more modern as you get towards the high rises. But even with that, it's going to feel like a real city. And so that commercial lease up is going to feel different than some of the existing smaller buildings that we're currently working on.
So Casa Ybor, which is in between 7th and 8th, that is now complete. You're looking for tenants. Focusing on an F&B concept, rooftop bar, ground floor restaurant. Are those still available, or have you found?
So in Casa Ybor is the overall brand for some of the strategy that's designed to support Gasworx.
Okay.
But it's the rest of Ybor, it's the West Ybor, and then the rest of Ybor efforts are under that brand. And there's a team built in the office, sitting right there in the heart of Ybor, that are working on all that.
So
And those buildings are going to fill up.
So Casa Ybor is this catalyst of the vision. Like, how do you bring the vision to reality? How do you put the people in the right places? What tenants you're selecting for what particular property, where in the development? That's Casa Ybor's, like this brand, this idea. You kind of have to have that for a project this size, don't you?
You have to have that.
Yeah.
And within that, that's oversight of all the ancillary properties that are supporting the massive, great transition that's happening. And on the base buildings of the Gomez and Pedroso, it's Casa Pedroso and Casa Gomez, which are the buildings that you're mentioning that are due west of Hyatt. Hyatt's amazing, by the way, right?
Yeah,
like that.
totally.
If anyone in Tampa hasn't tried that yet, plan it out. Spend an early Friday evening, have a couple of local cocktails and a great dinner, and walk around that area. Because what you'll see is we're talking to some of the restaurants now. Some of them are local and exciting, and they understand what Gasworx is going to bring and where Ybor's going. And there's a few local businesses that see the vision.
Totally.
But what's funny about this is, I've got relationships in South Florida and New York, and my team's been setting up meetings and having groups come down. One of our associates is from Manhattan. And what's funny, when people from New York come, they see this, their eyes light up because they can just see how it's all set up and it's just right here. It's about to happen. While sometimes the Tampa-based businesses are a little bit more like, well, Ybor, 2 people have gotten shot at in the last 12 months. Come on, Miami Beach, 2 people get shot at a week. Like, this is a part of an urban core. Like, I don't want to hear it. Just, it's going to clean up. When you bring all this 5,000 units, spending that much money on rent, it's going to clean up half of that with free market forces.
It's inevitable. And also, too, I mean, a shooting happened on Howard that got
well said.
very little press. And the police chief even misspoke and said, "Oh, yeah, here in Ybor on 7th Avenue," or whatever he said. It's like, boy, that doesn't help the cause. But so what you're saying is people from other markets see the vision more clear than maybe someone. We actually spoke about that earlier, how people that are saturated in a market or native to a market do have a bias for that market one way or the other.
Yeah, your mental model is formed. And it's hard to change that mental model. While when someone comes in with good industry knowledge and sees a blank slate, they can kind of see, oh, wow, Channelside grew up that fast. Water Street grew up that fast. You couldn't rent a space in Water Street. Part of what's exciting about working on these buildings, it's going to be untouchable real estate in 5 years. Once that vision that you had up there is done, it's going to be untouchable real estate. You can't get in Water Street right now. They're doing pre-leasing for phase 2 and 3 as Water Street's going further north.
Chicken or the egg argument. Do you think if you could snap your finger and this entire project was built out, is it too early, or is the demand for Tampa there? And the only reason I ask is because you put it all together, it's a lot of square footage. It is. How many millions of square feet and thousands of units? Are we there yet?
This is where I'll say, having had a place in urban Tampa for 20 years, at times I ask myself, am I too close to it? I was the guy making the joke before when some of the buildings in South Florida were 300 and they went up to 700,000-800,000. Ask myself, I don't know, it's a little pricey for Florida, Nebraska. And I'm like, no. These are going to jump to 3 or 4. Like, still move forward. Don't just let yourself be caught. Well, to that point, I do remember when Tampa took a huge residential hit, 2008, 2011. And you see all this going on and you say, feels a little frothy.
Yeah.
But if you look at the migration data and you look at the housing data, I'd submit it's a different storm this time. A lot of that was more speculative, while this time Tampa has a national buzz. And the only thing that's going to stop its growth and momentum is ourselves and the city leadership and all the different developers and getting public transit and having these discussions, the Riverwalk. I think the city's doing a great job setting the foundation for an amazing run.
I think so too. And people think I'm a blind optimist because they listen to the show, and I always talk so positively about all of these developments, partly because it's so exciting for me. I told that story about my family. I mean, I'm thrilled that all this is happening and all these positive changes are occurring, because Tampa used to not be so nice, frankly, when I was growing up. And now things are changing, and it's good to see. But the real reason why I believe in Tampa and in Ybor and in our urban core so much is, you mentioned it, the migration data, the demographics, the people moving here are wealthier than ever before. There's more people moving here to Florida in general than ever before.
Yeah.
And I believe that you couldn't lease these up fast enough. I think if you snap your fingers and it was all built, you'd have it filled up within 12 months. I really believe it. And when you look at data, it supports that statement. There was a statistic from 2022. I think it was like they were taking people's net worth of over 200,000 or 250,000. They were tracking where they went. We received, I believe, 20,000 of those people in one particular, I think 21 or 22. The second state, Florida, right? The second state was Texas at like 5,000. So not only are we receiving the lion's share of the people moving around the country in general, we're receiving the lion's share of the wealthy people too. Those wealthier people are going to be attracted to the newer developments, the new restaurants, the new apartments, the new condominiums, the new stuff. That's where all of those people will fall into place. The data shows that those people are moving here. So the development is lined up with the data.
And they're moving a lot of them are moving from urban markets as well, and they're affluent. But since I've met you, I've always appreciated your positive on your podcast and just in general, and you're inquisitive and you want to learn and have an open mind for it. So, I'm probably with you and if there's anything over positive and bullish on it. But when I look at it, there are a lot of projects delivering at one time. You have to acknowledge that. And then, you can study base employment jobs and migration and deliveries and all these things happening. There is some of that, but there is also some, if you build it, they will come. And the strategy in Ybor right now of working on buildings on 7th, working on West Ybor, working on Gasworx, having replaced the projects with La Union and that great community, it gives you a critical mass. And if you're able to look at that 10, 15, 20-year window in that generational impact and focus on that versus, hey, can I do a quick flip or can I lease my building and sell it? Or like if you have that, truly have that perspective, which is what the Gasworx and Kettler team and everyone that's working on this all have. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right.
So it's being phased smart. There's units delivering now that are filling up. If you were to go check out south of 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, all the way down to Adamo, you'd notice that right now there's a lot of the laydown areas, pre-construction, drainage of the water, the roads are barricaded. That iconic roundabout going into Ybor, that's going away. It's going to become a park. And all that is going to become the grid system. And it's all happening right now.
That's happening right now.
I jog through it every morning, running from Channel Side over to 7th and back. And it's... Yeah.
So this is all happening. I mean, how far along is it until we see things go vertical? And obviously things could shift, market changes, all that, but trajectory-wise, timeline.
You know, I'd submit that La Union's already complete, and that's a vertical, that's 5 stories in some parts of the building floor. Pedroso is complete. Gomez is complete. It's already going on.
Yeah.
We're already going on. And the core of Gasworx, which is, call it those 3 to 6, there's pads E1, E2, E3 that coming down from 7th. Those are all in process right now.
Yeah, all the infrastructure, right?
That's
the
a green
grid
lit.
system, the roadway, obviously underground work being done. That's happening. So I guess this is just a larger question, but on a project of that size, how does it work with the city? Like, how do you get the city to realign a street grid? Is there, I'm sure there's a give and a take. The developer offers some sort of a public benefit and the city agrees and then fixes the infrastructure.
It's a lot of hard work right there. you gotta give them that, because it's a combination of several initiatives at one time. Yeah, you have your PUDs and your entitlements and your planning and your massing and your scale and all of that. But the separate time, you're working with all the different parts of the city to make all these things align. Each one of them is a separate approval, separate process. Add in the fact that you got Ybor and Henka and the historic code and all that.
Right.
Creates
Barrio.
You're building a city within the city, though.
Right. Well, and then the police and the fire stations want to have a say, and all these increased residents. How's that going to play out?
Yeah.
All I know is we better be prepared for a new tax base. I mean, the next 10, 15 years, if all this comes to fruition, which it sounds like it is, we're going to have a lot of more money to play with as a city for new infrastructure.
That's the right way to look at it. People say the NIMBY not in my backyard, but there's a lot of benefit that comes from
Do
all
those
this.
people not drive around the roadways here? I mean, the amount of potholes and sidewalks to nowhere. We need a tax. We need a fat tax basis to be able to pay for this stuff. Things cost money. We need it. What's so wild too to me is talking about Gasworx is very exciting for a million different reasons. I mean, the scale of it and the new tenancy and the historical aspect of it, it's all very cool. But then you look at Ybor Harbor, an entirely different, huge project. You look at Water Street, phase 2, 3, future phases. Tampa Heights, what's planned over there. You work in other markets. Does Tampa have the largest urban core redevelopment happening in the country? How do you beat our scale?
It's well stated, and it depends on what basis you're coming from. Fun fact is that Manhattan, there's some data out there that indicates that it's 9% of the United States office product.
That's so crazy.
9% of the countries. It's unfathomable. It's almost hard to quote as a data point. So when they add 5 skyscrapers, it's a big deal, but as a percentage basis, so move that same thing to Tampa. When Tampa popping up the new West Shore development,
right,
all these mid-rise, the related project right over Kennedy, as you're heading west and you go over Riverside, Gasworx, Ybor Harbor, it's a lot, but I think there's a huge pent-up demand too.
Yeah,
because even like 10 years ago, guys like you and I we're still going through that area now, looking at those lots, saying why are there lots around Ybor Harbor, Gasworx, and through downtown? Why is this not filled out like a Miami?
Yeah, thanks for pulling that up, David.
very
Hot
cool.
Blocks. So Frank DiGiacomo, he's been on the show like 6 times. He's a good friend of mine. But he owns a company, Hot Blocks. They've created these renderings, which is basically a comprehensive picture of what Tampa's urban core will look like once a lot of these projects are complete. So David, if you go to Instagram down here, this is our Instagram. Click that.
Oh, that's so cool.
Pull up that post. So what we're looking at, if you're just listening, is this rendering of downtown Tampa, showing all these new buildings in blue. Look at the scale. So go to the right. This includes some projects by the port that may or may not go through. I think they were just conceptualized. But what I want to focus on is Gasworx and Ybor Harbor. Go back a couple, David. Go back two.
They will. We just don't know when. But that area will fill in.
Right. Well, and we talked too a little bit, that's where the Riverwalk is being extended. Once that happens, that'll be an absolute catalyst for development of the port. That'll all come in time. Now look at the scale. This is just what's unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
And to think this could all happen in the next 5-10 years, maybe even sooner. Right?
And without a significant macroeconomic event working against us, it will happen with normal growth and absorption, because the property is already acquired in Ybor Harbor, and the city has approved a development plan.
Right.
Getting that entitlement, that's your risky, challenging part. And by the way, the city supports and loves a lot of what's going on here because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And it should have or could have been done earlier. Tampa's growth and some of the COVID migration and energy have accelerated the rate of it happening, but the city's supported. The city's done a good job. So once your entitlements are approved and the land is owned and the development plan is at this level of massing, it would take a significant macroeconomic or state level event, something like a lot of hurricanes. It just have to be something really substantial to slow that momentum.
And also, too, I mean, the vision is in place, the capital's in place. I'd imagine the debt is lined up, and you guys have partnered with a big developer, right? Kettler, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
Kettler's
they certainly know what they're doing. They've done incredible projects.
It's a top national,
national developer.
Yep.
So the pieces and the players are in place for all this to go pretty relatively quickly.
And it's going to happen in a smart, smooth way where there's the current blocks that we talked about right south of 7th. Those are currently going to go up. And then you're going to have the buildings along Adamo as another chapter. And then from there, finishing out Nuccio Parkway and that land that you see up there on the left-hand side. And then from there, moving over to Ybor Harbor.
Wow. It's unbelievable. Let's talk real quick. We can wrap up with the macroeconomic events. So a few days ago, this episode will come out a little late, but there was an assassination attempt on Trump. Super crazy. So, I mean, I'm going through a refi deal right now over the weekend, and on Monday, I'm thinking, how is the appetite at the banks going to change? They're certainly looking at things like this, as they do with other macro events, probably international conflict, Gaza and Ukraine.
Yep.
We're in an election year. People are apprehensive in election years. There's these factors outside of real estate that kind of control real estate.
There are.
Throughout your career, how big of an impact do these macro events have? We talked about 2008. That's probably the biggest one.
Yes.
But what do you think moving forward as there's more political instability? Hopefully things change, but all of these changes that are occurring politically, have you seen an effect on the appetite of some of these loans or investors raising money? Where has it come to a head?
So we talked about markets earlier, and the capital markets or movement of money is no different than the Tampa Bay residential market or the High Park market, for that example. On a national level, you have all these different sources of debt and equity. You have local, regional banks, you have insurance companies, you have commercial mortgage-backed securities, you have private debt funds, and you have a whole array of other private capital on the debt side. And on the equity side, you have everything from guys like you and me pulling out our checkbooks, making things happen, all the way through the further range. Like we talked about my buddy at Blackstone earlier and how they're the preeminent on that. And then you got everything in between in that stack. So that movement of debt and equity, it moves differently. And it does pay attention to the macro events. I don't think that the unfortunate assassination attempt that occurred is going to have a terrible impact on the market. If the outcome of that day was different,
right,
that might be. But what I'll talk about is 12 months ago when a few of the banks started failing and there's a run on some of the banks and all that happened. Now that was a meaningful change in the capital markets. That or interest rates going from 3.5% to 7.5%, 8%, those are meaningful events. A year ago when there was that run on banks. Banks got concerned. I had 2 or 3 projects slow down, and banks come back and pull back. One of them retraded a loan and cut down the proceeds a lot. And then other times, the most common thing is they're now asking for more deposits as a relation on the borrowing. And so that's those trends. The banks tend to follow each other, and they tend to follow logical things. And they're low risk, low return because they're in first position debt. They're not making enough money. Whether it's 4% or 8%, you're getting a great deal. I think we've talked about this before on bank.
Yeah,
bank debt.
Best partner ever.
Best partner ever. But they're not built to take on those. So when macroeconomic things happen, they respond, they tighten up, and they do it in a systematic way. Now, there's still ways to get around that, meaning you can work with other banks. Some banks still don't tighten up as much as others, or there's private debt funds, or there's your high net worth individual. So you can still get deals done, but it does have an impact.
Coming to the table with more cash, putting more money down, right? That'll affect the outcome.
It will.
So a stock guy.
Or prices dropping.
Prices dropping.
If debt tightens up enough and you have to have more equity, that equity is looking for return on equity. So if the amount of debt that's accessible in the market goes down significantly, like an event like that, ultimately cap rates, like if interest rates go up, cap rates go up and the price goes down.
Yeah, that makes sense. So a stock guy could play the stock market. They could play the news. They could get ahead. Okay, this event happened. Now I'm in a position to do this to get ahead of that news.
Yeah.
In real estate, does it move that quick? Is it possible in development? And the only reason I ask is, I guess I'll just tell you my thesis first. And that is, we're in an election year. There's a lot of political unknowns and instability. In fact, it's pretty crazy if you really think about what's going on.
Yeah.
But put that aside. I believe that there's going to be an incredible opportunity this summer moving towards the election to be a buyer. I think there's an opportunity where a seller will get skittish and sell and get rid of a property, whereas before they may have held on to it. Another buyer could be apprehensive and pull out of a deal where you could come in if you have faith in your market. Yep. That's where I see an opportunity, is playing on some of the fear and having that faith in a local market or whatever product you're chasing, having faith it'll work out. And if someone else is scared, you immediately jump in with confidence. That's how I could, that's like my plan. That's the whole reason why I'm doing a refinance and I'm getting the gun cocked, ready to pull the trigger. I believe that there's going to be an opportunity until November at some point, and maybe it's a very small window to make a deal. In fact, you saw it during COVID. Really, there was like a 6-week window during COVID in Florida where you could make a hell of a good deal.
Where the bottom fell out.
But then things escalated very quickly.
Yeah. Warren Buffett, articulated it really well, is it's best to buy when everyone else is selling, and it's best to sell when everyone else is buying. As that relates to America and the Tampa market, those are totally different discussions. It does feel like the residential market in the Tampa area has softened up a little bit now. But it was at such a peak before that it was an unrealistic, unsustainable peak. So the question is, did it grow so much that there's some bubble in it? If inflation has made our dollar 30% less valuable, but property values are up a lot, it can feel like we're in a bubble, but our dollars were so much less that hedged into some of that. Oh, my property went from $1 to $2 million, I'm rich. Well, okay. Except your value is 30% less, so you really only made $600,000-$700,000 in an actual gain.
I have that conversation all the time. My house is worth so much. I have this equity. It's so exciting. But if I sell it, where the hell am I going to go? Exactly. That's the problem. Is inflation is this hidden tax or a hidden cost that people don't think about. And your property went up and you made a few extra $100,000, but that few extra $100,000 doesn't buy you any more than it did, years ago.
The consumer price index and all this stuff with the government and politics and inflation, the data is not great and it's very political. But I'll joke. There's a place in Miami that I buy burritos from for $6-7 5 years ago. They're now $18-19 there. And like, to me, that's real, right? That's lunch. You're used to it. It's still a delicious burrito. I know all the owners, and you're looking at like, that's a real sign of inflation.
Yeah.
That, of course, the property values, is going up to hedge it. But
and I think more than any bad news about any political issues we have in this country. I think what's worse is some of the inflation and the printing of money. Um, that and also just I think some of the issues we have with international policy. I guess all that to say, just things need to change in this country financially that I think are
Yeah.
way bigger factors in all of
Way.
this than an assassination attempt. Granted, like you said, if that outcome was different, boy, what a different conversation we'd be having. However, news like that, political news like that, I think, and even like a small run on the bank like we had, and some of those little news pieces are so small in comparison to the larger issues in the Federal Reserve and the money supply and these macroeconomic
Yeah.
China trading, oil, all
Yeah.
those huge factors are way more of a problem.
And it does, the amount of debt that America has put on itself is concerning. And it goes against what we're trying and should be teaching our new generations about fiscal responsibility. And at some level, you have to believe that the folks have better data and are making better decisions. And other times, as we all know, the politicians really make big mistakes. I was very concerned a year ago, and some of my friends talking late at night about, with what's going on in Russia, countries were dropping the US dollar as the currency. And remember, a year or two ago, it was scary with inflation because inflation was going up so quickly that the government had to change the rates. And so when the government took call it the regular residential loan, went from 3.5 to 7.5, 8%, in like unprecedented amount of time. And all of us on the street are saying, oh my goodness, this is
Hmm.
so challenging. And it is really challenging whether you're buying a house or whether you're developing a large commercial project. Debt going, so if you just think about $10 million at 3.5%, that's $350,000 a year in debt service. If that goes to 7.5%, that's $750,000. So your project that used to throw off a few hundred grand now throws off zero, and your bank's coming and calling. And that actually happened a lot. But getting back to the point, America's been around now for 400 years, plus minus, and you've learned a lot. And these folks are very smart. And what I have to imagine is happening is they're saying our biggest threat is the US dollar not being the global currency. And therefore, we can't let inflation get rampant. Because if the rest of the world loses faith in the US economy, we've got bigger problems. And if you think coming out of World War II, what made America extremely strong was controlling the waterways and controlling international trade and building a global economy where everyone could benefit. And that's how America became what it is today, of a superpower. And part of the trade-off with that was the Cold War in Russia, and saying, going against all you countries, we're going to help you ship stuff good, and we're going to make this global thing where everyone prospers. And for a big part, you've heard, people are living longer, people are richer, people are healthier. Well, there's some overeating problems, but that's a different tangent. But as a whole, the life capacity and quality of life is better for the whole globe. And even countries like Africa, way far behind, are catching up. Well, that's all part of the globalization. Now the globalization, it's going back to in-migration, building stuff in your own country and some of that. But we have to count on the U.S. government making the right decision
Boy,
on those
that's a
challenging topics.
risky assessment to trust the U.S. government to make the right decision, because it seems like they've gone against the younger generation's interest, but it's also
By
very
adding the
complicated.
debt.
That's one thing. I think some of the relationships we've built with other countries, I think we have too much militarization of other countries.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing, though. After World War II, we forged amazing relationships with some of our adversaries. And now those
Yep.
adversaries are our greatest allies, and their economies have been propped up by us as trade partners. Like Japan is the perfect example. They've exploded in growth over the last few decades. I mean, they have an
Explode. Yeah.
amazing economy, along with China. China's an air quote adversary, but they're our greatest trade partner. And look at their economy over the last few decades. I mean, it's exploded. So really, America has been the catalyst for the entire world, and that's shifting. And that's where things get weird. That's where I don't think I don't know who would sit in the chair you're in to answer
Yeah.
some of those questions, but I do think that it all comes back to faith in a market, right? It comes back to the faith you have in your particular market and how much you believe in your project. I don't care if you open a bagel shop or you're a real estate developer.
Or you're running the country.
Right.
It's a project.
It is a project, and you got to have faith in what you're doing.
You have to have faith in it. And look, and as an aside, the China, Russia, some of that, I was nervous when some of those folks are going off the U.S. currency. You're like 7 or 8 nations within a short span dropped the U.S. dollar over energy trade. On the flip side, China, that's our biggest concern, and Russia, they don't have it together. Like they really don't have it together. And so it's concerning when they start aligning. But on the flip side, like the one data point is the U.S. military spend, 800 and something billion. The number 2 nation is something like 80 billion.
Yeah.
So we're still pretty far ahead. We're still a pretty great land and pretty safe.
We pretty safe. We can sleep well at night.
We need to show up and do our jobs and pay our taxes. I of course use depreciation, everything else other American business people do, but I remember paying my first meaningful tax bill and saying like ouch, but heck, I built and sold a substantial project and made a profit. Like I have to give back to this country.
Yeah, I had a big tax bill last year, and and the last couple of years really was the first time in my life where I think when you start to make some decent money, you realize this as a young person, but you start to pay attention when you write that check. You go, oh, like let me start to care about what I'm paying attention to politically. Now that you start paying the tax man, you start caring a little more. That's for sure. Well, Josh, this has been great. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
How long was that, David?
It's a good one.
It's like 2.5. Shit. I'm sorry, folks. There's only 4 more people listening. No, this has been great. Josh, real quick, if people want to follow along, connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely, Garrett. As we've discussed, I was in the office telling deal case stories to the guys, and we were starting to create case studies on projects. And the rest of my team basically inspired me and said, no. Instead of just talking about project case studies, talk about mindset, finance, creating value, and doing good things as future leaders. And that's how we started Final Line. If you search Joshua Pardue, Joshua Pardue Tampa, or Joshua Pardue Developer, you'll find most of it on the internet, different online channels.
Joshua.Pardue is the Instagram handle.
Yeah.
I believe what's your website name?
There's a few different websites. I've got my GNP Development Company, GNP Dev, and then we're working on a JoshuaPardue.com, and of course on the LinkedIn. But the best place these days, I'd say, if you want to learn more about it's on the YouTube. Really, on YouTube is where we're creating the development case studies and mindset. There's the page.
Okay, good. Awesome. Joshua.Pardue on Instagram and YouTube. Check them out, people. Josh, thanks again. Alrighty.
Thanks, brother.
See you next week. Bye, everybody. Thank you guys for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like it. Check us out on YouTube, subscribe to our channel, give us a comment, give us some feedback. We want to know how we're doing. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.